We're going to explain the complicated timeline of the Friday the 13th franchise, beginning at a summer camp in New Jersey and ending with Jason in space.
So the first Friday the 13th film, it begins in 1957 at Camp Crystal Lake, and two counselors who sneak away from the bonfire are killed by some mysterious figure. And then in 1980, the camp is reopening by Bill Christie, who brings in a couple of counselors to help get things set up before the kids arrive. And one by one, everyone starts getting knocked off. They say it has a death curse, that it's Camp Blood is what they call the place because of all the accidents and the fires that have taken place over the years. And it's kind of a mystery to figure out who is doing what. There's a rumor that a little boy drowned in the lake. His name was Jason. And as it turns out, Betsy Palmer shows up and she's playing Pamela Voorhees, the mother of Jason. Turns out she's the killer, and everyone dies except for one girl. And at the end, Pamela is beheaded on the beach. And then a little boy, Jason, jumps out of the water and tips a boat, and we roll credits.
Did you know Kevin Bacon was in a movie?
Kevin Bacon was
in the original Friday the 13th. Yeah. I don't know if that was his first, but it was one of. I think it was like second.
He had done Animal House before that.
Oh, that's right. Animal House. Forgot about that.
Yeah.
Then he's done a couple other things. Maybe this was his, he was still working his way up, but I think this was the role that kind of made people like, oh, that guy can act. Let's see if he can dance too.
Yeah, this was like his major, like maybe one of his first main roles that he got. Also, Betsy Palmer, I mentioned her. She plays Pamela Voorhees, and she was known as pretty popular actress throughout her career. And she always played like wholesome characters. So when she signed on to do Friday the 13th, and had to play a villain, and she got so much flack over this, like people writing letters. Why are you doing this garbage? Why are you doing this? They question it, and she was just like, you know what? Because I want to. It's fun. It's different. Fun. I wanted to do something a little different. So, and she was creepy in this role. She really was.
Well, I think that's what they were going for. I mean, you've had the horror movies where people talk like this and everything. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of just straight up psychopaths like Norman Bates from Psycho. He was just this very timid person and everything, but then he was evil. Yeah. So that was, I think this was one of the more mainstream since then, that you had that very calm, just like, oh, hey there. And then you see her replicated forever.
Yeah.
There isn't a year that goes by that a horror movie doesn't come out where there's some creepy old lady or timid person, and then all of a sudden it's just like, Rrr.
Yeah.
So the first Martha Stewart of horror.
Pretty much,
yeah.
But for a low budget movie, the fact that they got somebody who had been acting since, I don't know, the early 50s and was a fairly known person, and then they, were able to cast the future superstar Kevin Bacon. So, whoever was the casting director in this movie did a pretty decent job.
They decided at the end of this movie that was pretty much going to be it. It was kind of a one and done. They wanted a sequel, which we all know they got the sequel. And they're trying to figure out, what do we do? Who's going to be the villain? And they're like, well, let's have Jason be the villain. And the creator said, I can't do that. Jason's dead. And they're like, it's okay. We'll bring him back somehow. And they never actually explain why Jason is a grown man in the second movie if he drowned in the lake.
That's stupid.
Do ghosts age?
That's the question. Did he drown and she was getting revenge? Or did he not drown and lived in the woods and grew up a grown man?
This is comic book level discontinuity. Like when they kill off a character and then 10 years later, they're like, oh, we shouldn't have killed off Robin. We should bring him back. And they just show up.
That's kind of what happens in part 2, which we'll get to that right now. So Friday the 13th part 2 takes place 5 years after the first film. The very beginning is you see some boots walking across the rainy street and into the apartment of the final girl from the first movie, and she gets killed. The rest of the movie takes place at Camp Packanack. It is a counselor training center, and it's on Crystal Lake. It's not Camp Crystal Lake, but it's on the same lake. And one by one, everyone starts getting eliminated as usual. But this time it's a grown-up Jason. And in this version of Jason, he's got his overalls and his flannel shirt, and he's wearing a potato sack on his head. And this is one of my favorite versions of Jason because I think it's actually a little bit more terrifying than the hockey mask. But at the end of this one, he gets chopped in the neck, and everyone thinks he's, that he's dead, and they go back to the cabin, and then Jason comes crashing through the window without the mask on, and he's got a beard, and he's got like long hair on one side, and he's kind of bald on the other side, and then everything goes to black, and then the next morning they're being carted off in an ambulance, so you don't know if Jason actually is dead. Was that a hallucination, or are we going to have a part 3? We're going to get a part 3.
Was the potato sack mask done for the first time here, or was that something that was borrowed? Which came first, this or Texas Chainsaw?
Oh, Texas Chainsaw was 70s.
Texas Chainsaw was the first major slasher film.
Okay. The potato mask actually looks like the chainsaw guy from Resident Evil 4. So you can kind of see this look weaving its way through horror films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I actually liked this version of him. He was still kind of, pretty much a human being. He wasn't the decaying version everybody thinks of. He was just like a 40-year-old man living in the woods. You get to see his house in this one. He's got some shack out in the middle of the woods. But I think the potato sack was really cool when you just got the one little eye that you can see. And there's still some humanity in him too. There's a scene at the end where Jenny is tricking him, to try to act like she is his mom to get him to let down his guard. And he's got, you close up on his eyes, and he looks like for a minute there, he's got a little bit of humanity in him. And so this is one of my favorite versions of Jason Voorhees. So next in the series came Friday the 13th, Part 3D. Yes. They jumped on the 3D fad that was going on in the early 80s, kind of like Jaws 3D. This was filmed in 3D, horrible 3D, by the way. I have 3D glasses with my set, and it doesn't really work very well, but you can see where they were supposed to be making the 3D parts of it. You can see the strings. You can see it was bad. Anyway, this picks up the next day after Part 2. And this time we're at Higgins Haven, and it's just like a country retreat for a family, and a girl's going back there with her friends, and she hasn't been there in a couple of years because she had a bad experience with some crazy dude in the woods. I wonder who that could have been. But along the way, we meet a biker gang who, they all get killed in the barn. And basically it's the same premise. Everyone's going to get eliminated one by one. What makes this one different is at the end, they hang Jason. He gets loose, and then he gets stabbed again. And you think that he's actually dead. They leave him in the barn. This is the episode where Jason gets his iconic hockey mask by killing Shelley off screen, but he takes the mask, and from then on, that's what he's going to be known for. Another difference in Jason in this one, this picks up the next day after Part 2. In Part 2, he had the beard and the long hair. In this one, he's wearing a green jumpsuit at the very beginning. He's bald with no mustache or beard. So I don't know when he had a time to change his clothes or get a haircut, but somewhere along the way, he did.
Why did he pick a green jumpsuit?
It's like a green workman.
Did he get that from the barn? Was that like a landscaping?
I think if you look closely at the very beginning, the long opening sequence, the lady's out doing laundry and he's walking through it. So I think he takes the jacket from there, but it doesn't explain why he's clean shaven and bald. But, hey, what are you going to do?
Doug, reveal to us your secret fan theory on how Jason shaved his head.
Oh, well, he shaved his head at the end of Part 2 when he jumped through the glass, because the glass shattered and it just kind of cut up his head and his face because he was just wearing a bag.
Brilliant.
If he were. And that cut everything off. So that's why he was bald in Part 3.
That makes sense.
Extremely
and
probable.
He heals pretty quick. I think he may be you don't hear or see a lot of 1980s X-Men stuff. Maybe that's Wolverine.
Wow. Okay, so Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter, takes place actually the same day that the third one ended. It starts off with a long shot of Jason laying in the barn. They're going to take him to the hospital. They put him in the morgue. Sergeant Fackler from Police Academy is there. And he's the morgue guy. Jason kills the people at the hospital, and starts making his way back to Camp Crystal Lake. But before he does, he's going to stop off at the home of Tommy Jarvis. This time he's played by Corey Feldman. It's the first time we get to see the Tommy Jarvis character. Next door, there is a house that's been rented out by a bunch of kids, including Crispin Glover. And we'll get a little into that here in a second. Normal stuff ensues. Jason, at the very end of this movie, though, is really killed by Tommy Jarvis. Tommy shaves his head, goes downstairs, and hacks Jason with a machete. And that was supposed to be it. Done. Jason's gone. We're not doing this anymore. We know what happens. But the Crispin Glover in this movie, same year that year before Back to the Future came out. And Crispin Glover in this movie has probably the sickest dance moves I have ever seen in my life. Roll that beautiful footage.
So during that dance, they actually, while they were filming, I think a lot of people know that they play AC/DC's Back in Black. So that's what he's actually dancing to. However, and I lost the name of the song, but the song that they play in the movie was by a band called Lion. And it just so happens that a couple years later, they wrote another song for a fairly popular movie called Transformers. Transformers, the movie theme song, came out in 1986. And yeah, they got Lion to do the main soundtrack, or the main song to the soundtrack. And the fact they beat out Weird Al for the main song, that was pretty amazing.
Dare to be stupid, man.
No woman can resist those dance moves. No way.
They're killer, aren't they?
Pretty decent. Corkscrew.
Ted, where's a corkscrew? Ted. Friday the 13th, Part 5, a new chapter. This time we are at a halfway house. It's several years later. It does start off with Corey Feldman watching Jason being dug up from his grave and coming up. And then he finds out it was just a dream because Tommy is much older at this point. He's been institutionalized from all the trauma that he faced. So he's going to go at a halfway house. They decided with this one to do something different. They took the Halloween 3 approach, where we're not going to have the main villain in this, but we have like an imposter, and the imposter is ambulance driver Roy Burns, who takes on the Jason persona after seeing his son murdered at the halfway house. This one really did not go over well with fans because they wanted the actual Jason. There are clues throughout this movie now when you watch it that it's not Jason. Jason has a red triangle on his mask. Roy's wearing one with a blue triangle. At the end of the film, Tommy, they freeze frame on Tommy wearing the Jason mask with a knife like this, like he's about to kill the lady in the room with him at the hospital. Kind of teasing like, this is where we're going to go with this. Like everyone's going to take on the Jason persona. Fans hated it. They didn't like it. And they decided to scrap that idea. But I think the highlight of this movie is the doo-wop singing scene while the guy is sitting on the crapper.
Ooh, baby, ooh, baby, ooh, baby, ooh, baby, ooh, baby.
It's amazing. So yeah, anyway, this did not go over well with the fans, so they had to abandon that and move on to the next one.
I really liked Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Mm-hmm. I liked how they were doing they wanted to do an anthology thing. And I have the same feelings with this. Mm-hmm. I have a special place in my heart for Part 4 and for Part 6 because I was right at that special age. That's about the time I saw it, and then I quickly fell in love with Freddy. But I enjoyed Friday the 13th Part 5. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, why is Jason here now? What's going on? Then it's like, oh, that's not Jason. And it was like, that's kind of a cool twist. You know, at the time, I don't think too many people saw that coming. You know, like Drew said, other than the blue triangle, but people didn't break down movies back then like the way they do now. Yeah. Watch them 17 times and can sit there and go frame by frame and look at stuff. So I enjoyed this one too, because it was like, hey, okay, they're going with something new, and it's not just the same thing over and over and over again. But I guess that's what people want, because I mean, both Halloween and all of them, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. They just
keep recycling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think that's the main reason why I'm more of a Nightmare fan than a Friday or Halloween fan, because at least with Nightmare on Elm Street, you could do some unique things while in your dream.
Yeah.
Where Friday the 13th, it's just like man walking around, axe, I guess he had a few kills with different. Didn't he kill somebody with like a weed whacker though?
We're going to get to that one. Yeah. He got creative, but I agree with you with part 5. The more I saw part 5, the more I enjoyed it. I'm like,
it's very similar, kids getting killed by masked man, but the twist at the end made it cool. And it's like, oh, okay. And like Drew said, it was interesting to say, somebody else going to be Jason in the next one? Is there going to be somebody insane? What's happening? And yeah, that kind of ending where it ended with him with the mask and he's about ready to kill his therapist. And then how it jumps to part 6 after that. It's like, well, what happened then? Anyway.
Yeah. Friday the 13th, part 6, Jason lives. They're going to bring the masked man back. They decided since 5 didn't work right, we'll get him back here. And they do it kind of a old classic horror film style. Tommy shows up. He wants to make sure that Jason really is dead. He digs up his grave, stabs him with a metal rod. Lightning comes shooting down. Boom, we've got Jason Voorhees back. He gets up, he punches Horshack in the chest and knocks out his heart. And Jason makes his way back to Camp Crystal Lake. Tommy, meanwhile, is trying to convince the police officers that you've got to go out and look for him. He really is back. And this one might be my favorite of the movies because it's so different than the other ones. What makes this movie different than the others is just the feel of it. It has action scenes. It's got a car chase. It's got rock music by Alice Cooper. And this is the only movie in the franchise without nudity. There's no nudity in this one. And they have a lot of like humor where they're like referencing horror films and the horror genre in particular. I just think this one is probably my favorite one of them. And this one ends with Tommy saying that the only way to get Jason to go away is basically you have to return him to his original resting place, which is the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake. So chains him up to a rock, throws the rock over, and drowns Jason, which brings us back to the question, is that his original resting place? Did he really drown in the lake or did he not? Again, I don't know.
At this point, I don't think anybody knew.
No.
They're just like, yeah, just make it at Camp Crystal Lake. It'll be fun. Just have them stab people.
Yeah, they call it Camp Forest Green in this one. This is the only Friday the 13th movie that takes place at the camp where there's actually children. And all the children in this movie were actual locals. They filmed this down in Georgia, and these were locals. And they had to get permission from the parents, like, hey, do you care if they stay up all night and be in this movie? And all the parents were like, yeah, absolutely. And so they signed off on it. But
did they tell her? Did they actually tell the parents it's a horror movie?
Yes, they told them what it was.
Oh, okay.
And they said, like, none of your kids, we're not killing any kids or anything like that, but we just need them to be there because it adds the suspense. But yeah, I think this one's just a fun one. This is a fun movie. And
yeah, you can tell they're having fun with it.
Yeah. And there was supposed to be some more scenes in it where you get introduced to Jason's father, who in the 5th one, they talked about how Jason was cremated, but in here they're digging him up. So it's like, so was he cremated? He was buried. And as it turns out that Jason's father has paid off people to bury him, but just say he's cremated, but he paid him to take care of his grave and bury him instead. You never get to see his face and you don't hear him speak, but that was supposed to be at the end of that movie, but they didn't use it.
And that's a consequence of them deciding they were moving on from Jason in the previous film, right? And they had to retcon it to bring him back. Wow.
Yeah.
But they didn't even do that. So now we're even more confused. But still, I mean, like Drew said, it is a fun movie. I mean, it's not just the camp counselors. I mean, he's just going around anybody that shows up. There's people playing paintball and it's just like whoosh, decap.
Yeah. Did a 3 for 1.
2 people who just got married and they're on a motorcycle and they decide to have a picnic at midnight.
Yeah. Now that
kill was a good idea.
That kill is interesting because it was not originally there. They had to go back and reshoot that one because normally in these movies, they tell you got to tone down the violence. When they submitted this one, they said, hey, can you add another kill or two? And they're like, sure. So they were actually
we killed all the counselors, so we need to just find some random people, I guess. But
so they added that scene of those two hanging out in the woods on a motorcycle, drinking champagne. Because why not?
Nothing can happen out in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere.
Not at all.
Yeah, totally. I mean, where were they? I mean, this is up in Jersey, so, there's bears and devils up there.
Mm-hmm. Toxic Avengers.
Yes. Forgot about that, dude. Yeah. That's just not a place to have some champagne right after you got married. Why aren't they in a hotel?
Friday the 13th, Part 7, A New Blood. This one features a girl with telekinesis and the guy who, Bernie Lomax from Weekend at Bernie's. She's got telekinesis. At the very beginning, her dad's very abusive to her mom, and she uses her powers to drown him in the lake. And then years later, she's there with her psychiatrist, Bernie. She thinks she's supposed to be helping him, but what he's really trying to do is exploit her because she's got these powers. She can move things with the mind, and he wants to exploit that. And she gets really upset, and she goes out to the lake, and she tries to resurrect her dad. Well, guess who she brings back? She brings back Jason Voorhees this time, and for the first time, played by Kane Hodder. The storyline is pretty much the same. He's going to go and dice up a bunch of people. But at the end of this one, she telekinesis him back into the lake is what she's trying to do. Well, she resurrects her dad. Her dad comes in, pulls Jason into the water at the end of it. And that's how the movie ends. This, Doug, is where he kills somebody with a gigantic chainsaw. Where he got this gigantic chainsaw, I have no clue. But I mean, this thing's like 10 feet long with that blade. And he's just walking and chasing Bernie as Bernie's running through the woods. It's like, couldn't outrun him. And then the chainsaw. 40,
an 80-pound chainsaw.
Yeah. So this one's okay. This is usually where I stop watching.
Yeah. This is what broke me. This is, like I said, I kind of was introduced with part 4. I enjoyed part 5. 6 was like fun. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, this girl has telekinesis. And it's like,
that's very Stephen King. The Shining, he kind of used that idea to represent telekinesis and weaved it through multiple books. I wonder if that was like an inspiration that he took to introduce that into Friday the 13th.
It's possible.
They were just running out of... Yeah. And this is the episode that he kills somebody with a weed whacker.
Yes.
All the
party favor. Huh? He does, and he also kills a girl with the party favor.
Oh,
he puts that horn thing in her, like shoves it in her eye, and then it honks. Beep beep or whatever it makes, it was bad.
Yeah, that's I wouldn't give this one a recommend personally.
No, I would just say skip this one. And which brings us to Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan.
They truly gave up.
I really don't even want to talk about this one. A bunch of seniors from high school, not senior citizens, seniors from high school are taking a cruise into Manhattan. Sure. And Jason gets on board and kills a lot of people on the ship. That one girl's trying to make like a rock video down in the basement of the ship, and he gets her. And then they get to Manhattan. Huge island of Manhattan, millions and millions of people, but Jason's only focused on 3 of them. And
no one else, very few other people see Jason.
Well, he walks right down Times Square.
Yeah.
And
New York is a weird place. So.
It is. And then they melt him in some kind of liquid goo, and they show Jason as a little boy, but he's not deformed. He's just looks like Uncle Fester, but just shorter. It's awful. And I'm kind of done talking about this one.
I like my version better, where he's actually on a ship with senior citizens instead of seniors in high school.
That would have actually been better for the movie. I think that actually would have been better.
Is this a spoof on the Muppets Take Manhattan?
There's no musicals in this one. I mean, there is that one rock video.
It isn't even good enough to be a spoof of itself.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's 1989. We better make another Friday the 13th. We made one last year. We skipped 87, so we don't want to upset our fans.
It's horrible.
Yeah, this was, yeah.
The next entry is not titled Friday the 13th. It's just Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, but it's not. This one, Jason is somehow miraculously alive at the beginning of it, and he's in the woods, and he's stalking this lady who's by herself. Turns out she's like an FBI agent, and they've got him surrounded, and they blow him up with grenades and missile launchers and machine guns and completely disintegrate his body. And they take what's left of it to the morgue. And while they're there, the mortician, who is played by
Stephen Williams,
thank you, decides to eat Jason's heart. And by doing so, Jason now possesses him. So whenever you look at him in a mirror, he looks like Jason, but to everybody else, he looks like that person. And all he does in this movie is jump from one body to the next. And apparently Jason has a sister, and he's trying to get to the sister so he can possess, because only through a Voorhees can he be reborn. And
is he going to impregnate?
At the very end, he's like a little parasite, and he is going to take over her body. So that's how he's born again.
Very creative.
Yeah, it doesn't work. And at the very end, you see his mask laying in the dirt, and then Freddy's glove comes up and grabs it and pulls it down into the dirt. So that's going to lead us to the spin-off Freddy versus Jason, which wasn't a horrible movie, but
yeah, that wasn't bad.
But this movie is not good at all.
So why the title Jason Goes to Hell? Because that title is gold, but it sounds to me like there is no hell on screen, which would be the entire reason I would go to see that movie.
Yeah, Freddy pulls him down to hell, maybe. I don't know, but you're right. It's a great title, but it just was ridiculous.
Oh, man.
Ridiculous.
What a waste.
Yeah. Again, that's one that I just don't watch. Like, I skip it.
You know, there are actually some scientific studies out there that you can read about organ donors taking on some of the traits of their donors. So people who never, or maybe even despised classical violin, they get a liver or a heart or something from a classical violin player. And when they wake up from surgery, it's like they have this newfound love for classical music, which they hated before. There are lots of interesting studies about that. And hey, maybe Jason Goes to Hell was based on real science. Eat somebody's heart and you take on their traits.
That's a stretch. And then finally, we reach Jason X. Jason X. He's Jason in space. And that's how we got there. He's frozen at the beginning. He's thawed out 400 years later. He's on a spaceship. He becomes a robo Uber Jason. Yeah.
We've talked about it.
We talked about this one. We got another story. We could podcast about that. You can watch that one there. But I mean, that's pretty much it for the Friday the 13th franchise. They did do a 2009 reboot of Friday the 13th, which was, I really enjoyed that one too. They took like the best aspects of the first 4 films and put it into this movie. And I thought they did a great job with it. And I was really disappointed that they didn't do another one. I was really hoping for another one. But yeah, that's pretty much the main Friday the 13th franchise from 1980 to Jason X in space. There's a lot of good in there. And then there is a lot of bad. So
a lot more of that.
Yeah. Just stop watching after 6. Watch the first 6. Don't worry about the rest of them.
Does Jason X qualify as so bad it's good, or is it just a debacle?
It's a snakes on the plane type movie.
Yes, very good.
They know they're making a bad movie. It's not like I'm making a good movie and it was bad, but so bad it's funny. It's just they knew they were making a stupid movie, and it made it fun, even though it is stupid.
I mean, I personally could have done without it, but yeah, what are you gonna do? So hey, there you go. That's it from start to finish. Friday the 13th franchise, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Whole lot of ugly.
Whole lot of ugly.
You might be surprised to know that we did a deep psychological and spiritual analysis of Jason X while he was in space. So if you want to see that, watch this video next.